Hello, my name is Jumpy, and last time I left off ready to start talking about Saw 4. Much like the previous two films, Saw 4 was directed by Darren Lynn Bousman. They needed a script, but Lee Winnell was busy that day, so Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan stepped in and wrote the screenplay. Saw 4 begins in a morgue with John Kramer's corpse on a table. A medical examiner named Dr. Hefner conducts an autopsy. We get to see all of this in drawn-out, explicit detail. Over the course of a few minutes, Hefner removes John's brain, then cuts open his chest before finally checking his stomach and finding something very interesting inside. If you haven't seen the movie and don't know, please guess what you think it is, and I'll tell you in a moment. Now this scene made me laugh the first time I watched this movie in a theater. Sure, the effects team did an impressive job. But we didn't need to see the entire autopsy. This is the first time in the series where I felt one of the films was just unnecessarily dwelling on the gore. Let's compare this to the surgery scene in Saw 3. That earlier scene had actual stakes. If Lynn fucked up and John died, her head would explode. Drawing that scene out gave it suspense. But here with the autopsy, there's nothing. We know John's dead, and other than showing off the effects, the point only comes when we see what's in his stomach. The scene could have been very truncated, with the camera focused a lot more on the medical examiner and letting the audience just hear the sounds of cutting up John's corpse, instead of showing it so graphically. But back to what's inside his stomach. If you guessed that it was a tapeworm, look at you. You're half right. In the last movie, we got to see John pour wax on a tape, but it wasn't explained further. Now there's a flashback where he swallows the tape. Detective Hoffman arrives and plays the tape. John's voice says that his work won't end with his death, and that Hoffman will be tested. Movie then cuts to its first trap inside a mausoleum. Two dudes wake up wearing collars chained to a machine in the middle of them. One has his eyes sewn shut, and the other has his mouth sewn shut. There are weapons around, and they have a violent struggle. The man who can't talk kills the man who can't see and gets a key. Next up, a SWAT team investigates an underground area using a little robot with a camera. SWAT Commander Rigg and Detective Hoffman watch on a monitor. When the robot finds Carrie's body, Rigg believes he can save her and rushes in like he did without a gas mask in Saw 2, despite Hoffman telling him not to do it. Rigg reaches Carrie and is dismayed to find out that she's already dead. Hoffman shows up behind him. Hoffman tells Rigg, "Cherish your life," which confuses Rigg. It turns out Hoffman was reading a message written on the wall, which the distracted Rigg didn't notice. This moment is very similar to the part in the second movie when Carrie says, "Look closer, Detective Matthews," to Eric, and is reading words on the wall like it's a part of their conversation, and he doesn't know what she means at first either. Two FBI special agents who were working with Carrie show up. Their names are Lindsay Perez and Peter Strom. Hilariously, Strom attempts to give Hoffman a taste of his own medicine from just a moment earlier. He cryptically says, "Open the door, you will find me," and throws Hoffman a key. It turns out Strom was just repeating Carrie's final message to the two special agents, and those words were accompanied by that key. Seriously, these characters really need to stop doing that. It's not difficult to preface these quotes with context. Hey, it says "cherish your life" on the wall behind you. The last thing we heard from Carrie is, "Open the door and you will find me." And those words came with this key. They think they're Jigsaw or something. Hoffman gives them back the key. He doesn't want to get blamed if it gets lost. The special agents look at the body. Perez notices that the trap is unlocked, so Carrie should have been able to escape. Strom is convinced that someone else helped Amanda and John lift the body up into the trap. Back at the station, Rigg looks at evidence, and he pulls out a magazine issue of the Journal of Civil Engineering with a very distinguished John Kramer on the cover. This made me laugh the first time I watched the movie, and I still love it. It's akin to the moment in Saw 2 where he's eating some food. Just the contrast of something so normal with the horrible shit he's done is amusing. But what's also of note is that Rigg is watching an interview tape featuring Jill Tuck, who's the woman that John was thinking about in the last movie during his brain surgery. Jill is John's ex-wife. I'm sure Chris would love to hear about their divorce. When Rigg goes home to his apartment, his wife Tracy is getting ready to visit her mom, and she asks him to come with her, but he's too committed to the case to take a break. She tells him that he can't save everyone. The movie isn't subtle in its setup, but it works for me. Rig gets ready for bed later and he hears something and investigates. Because he's remodeling the place, his living room is filled with plastic sheets that look like shower curtains. Even though we know someone's going to jump out, and then they do, it's not a bad suspense scene. In a room, Hoffman writes a letter and puts it into an envelope. We see a pig mask behind him, hear a spooky noise, and then it cuts back to Rig. He's next to some real shower curtains this time, lying in the bath with the water running. He wakes up and goes out the door, which starts a tape on his TV. Basically, Rig is being tested because he's obsessed with saving people, instead of letting them make their own choices. The tape shows that Eric Matthews is still alive after being imprisoned for 6 months. He's standing with a rope around his neck on a melting block of ice. Detective Hoffman is there too, strapped to a chair. The block of ice and Hoffman are balanced on opposite sides of a giant platform. How this is supposed to work is that if too much ice melts and Eric slides off the block, the water will flow down towards Hoffman and the wires by his feet, and he'll be electrocuted. There's a countdown timer for 90 minutes. Rig off the bat, this scenario shares some similarities to Jeff's series of tests. Both are tested because of their obsessions. Both run into multiple people along the way and are instrumental in whether or not those other people live or die. There are a few differences. Jeff is supposed to forgive his people, whereas Rig is supposed to let these people make their choices and not save them himself. Jeff is also confined to the same building, whereas Rig gets to go to different buildings all across Jigsaw City. Rig has 90 minutes for his series of tests to figure out what to do, which is 30 minutes less than Jeff got. Maybe next time, these movies will cut another 30 minutes from a long time limit. For his first test, Rig finds a woman in a chair. The tape plays and Jigsaw really wants Rig to see what he sees and just walk away. He wants this more than Chris wants a divorce. But Rig can't just leave her there. The woman's hair is caught in the gears behind her that will twist, pull, and rip her hair from her scalp. Rig releases her before it's too late. He goes to get something to help her, and she grabs a hidden knife. When he returns, she tries to kill him. He restrains her and then throws her against a mirror, and she bounces back. That's what really happens, but that's not what the audience gets to see. I'm really excited to talk about this. Instead, the movie has the most amazing transition I've ever seen in my life. It's even better than giant Danny Glover in Saw 1. He was so big. When the woman hits the mirror, she breaks the glass and continues to fall forwards into the mirror itself. Behind the glass is the police station, and she falls through it and out of frame as the next scene starts. I think Rig built this portal from his apartment to the station during his remodeling because he just didn't like the commute to work. Unfortunately, I believe it's only one-way teleportation right now, because he entered the front door earlier instead of walking out of the mirror. He really needs to get this figured out so he doesn't get stuck at work with his car at home if no one else wants to drive him back. Rig then plays the woman's tape recorder. She was a pimp named Brenda, and Jigsaw tells her that Rig will save her life and she will go to prison for her crimes. Or, she can be saved and then kill Rig to get away. Rig finds 2 keys and then leaves his home. Strom and Perez are on the case. At Rig's apartment, they find pictures of Jill Tuck, so they bring her in for questioning. A man with a gun enters the room where Eric and Hoffman are and activates something. One of the keys that Rig grabbed was for a motel room, so he goes there and finds out that he's supposed to test a man named Ivan who's working the front desk. Rig lures Ivan to the room where the trap is located. Inside, there's evidence that Ivan has raped several women. Rig makes Ivan get into the trap and doesn't stick around to see what happens. Ivan doesn't make it. There are some flashbacks during Jill's interview. She runs the Homeward Bound Clinic, which is a health clinic that I speculate is named after the movie that John and Jill went to see on their first date. Homeward Bound 2, Lost in San Francisco. Alright, that's where these movies take place. I'm not calling it Jigsaw City anymore. I like San Francisco more. One time at the clinic, a man named Cecil gets upset about having to wait and gets into a fight with Gus, the guy who later gets shot in the eye in Saw 2. During their Rumble Stiltskin, Cecil pulls out a knife, but John talks him out of using it. I'm always going to say this. Tobin Bell is great in this role. Later on, while John waits for his pregnant wife Jill outside the clinic one night, he's approached by Addison, who is also in the house in Saw 2 with Gus. Here, she tries to solicit him, and he tells her to go home. I really love that this movie shows how John met a few of his victims. When Jill locks up, Cecil shows up with a knife and forces his way in to steal some drugs. When he's leaving, he aggressively pushes the door open and inadvertently hits Jill in the stomach, which causes her to lose her unborn child. When Strom and Perez hit up the motel room crime scene, we first hear the name Art Blank. Someone used this name to get the motel room for almost a week. It's gotta be a pseudonym, right? No, he's a lawyer and that's his real name. He's been missing for 2 weeks now. Strom puts together that Jigsaw is trying to recruit Rigg. They get a clue about a property and head there to find a couple of file folders with the words, "Open the door and you'll find me," on one, and "You are in danger of getting too close. Step back," on the other. They figure out Carrie's message wasn't really from Carrie. Back when Rigg was a uniformed cop, he once tried to help a little girl who was being physically abused by her dad, but neither the little girl nor her mom would talk because he was hurting both of them. Rigg punches the dad. Back at wherever the hell Eric and Hoffman are, we get a clear view of the other man's face. He's the guy whose mouth was sewn shut at the mausoleum, and there's a flashback showing that he's the lawyer Art Blank, who represented the abusive father that Rigg punched. Nothing became of this because Hoffman lied and said that the father attacked Rigg. Because of a clue at the motel, Rigg goes to the school. He finds the girl's parents in one of the rooms. The father is dead, but the mother is alive. They were both impaled with multiple pointy metal rods that were positioned so that they didn't hit any of her arteries, but so that they did hit his. Jigsaw asks her if she can disconnect from him. She pulled the rods out to free herself, which killed her husband. While Jigsaw thinks of this as a separation, Chris would call it a divorce. Rigg helps the woman pull the last rod out and hands her the second key that he got from his apartment. There's a clue telling Rigg to go home, but it also leads him to the Gideon meatpacking plant. He pulls the fire alarm on his way out. Strom and Perez arrive at the school, and we find out that all 3 of the people who died in Riggs's test had Art Blank and his fake-sounding name as their lawyer. He's also Jill's lawyer. When one of the forensics people is dusting a bowgun-like device for prints, it goes off and it shoots one of the metal rod arrows into an investigation woman's face. It's horrible what happened. The firing was erroneous, but at least the woman is now in a better place. Strom and Perez look around some more and enter an office. Inside is Billy the Puppet sitting on a chair with a tape recorder around his neck, along with some candles on the floor. Perez plays the tape, which is addressed to her. It says that Strom will soon kill an innocent man, and that whatever she does next is very important. The tape's audio volume then gets lower and harder to understand, which is something John also did in the first movie when he tacked on an extra clue at the end of Dr. Gordon's tape. But this time it's not just one short sentence. The tape keeps going, and Perez leans in closer to try to hear it better. And the puppet's face explodes, and pieces of it get stuck in her face. I love this jump scare. Before she's taken away by the paramedics, she gives Strom the key that they've had since before the start of the movie. Now that there's less than 20 minutes left on the countdown, Art hands Eric a gun and a bullet. Strom goes back to Jill and frantically asks her questions. There's some vertical editing, including a couple of shots where he points his gun at himself, which parallels Jeff in the last movie with his suicidal thoughts. And then Strom pointing the gun at Jill. There's a flashback here of John and Cecil. When Cecil wakes up after being kidnapped, John talks to Cecil and then puts a device-a-roni on his head. It has 8 sharp knives positioned in front of his face. Cecil needs to push through the knives to press a button in front of him to release himself. Cecil gets out and lunges towards John. John gracefully moves out of the way, and Cecil falls into a barbed wire cage that was behind John. This is hilarious. We also see John working on a large container filled with glass shards. Strom puts together that Gideon is both the name of the unborn child and the first building John designed as an architect. Meanwhile, Rig arrives at the Gideon meatpacking plant. There's a note saying time is on his side, and to think about who he's actually saving. He enters another area, reminding him to see, feel, save, and judge as Jigsaw himself does. Back in the room, Art takes off his jacket to reveal that he has a device on his back. Rig approaches the door just before the timer runs out, and Eric yells, "Don't open the door," and then shoots Rig through the door as he's opening it. Even though the bullet came from Art, it's not a blank. When the door is opened, it sets off the device that Art activated when he first arrived. This causes two giant blocks of ice to slam together on Eric's head, making it explode. Rig also shoots Art when he enters. The water then slides down towards Detective Hoffman. Rig and Art are both on the floor. Right before the device on his back kills him, Art slides over a tape recorder to Rig. It reveals that Rig failed his test because he tried to save everyone instead of letting them save themselves. Hoffman immediately pops up. He's another Jigsaw accomplice. That note he was writing earlier was the note Amanda read in Saw 3 that made her cry, but we don't know its contents yet. Also, the pig mask behind Hoffman earlier was just hanging up on a coat rack. Hoffman says game over to the dying Rig and he leaves, but he doesn't even shut the door. What the heck? During this time, Strom arrives and finds Jeff's keys. That's odd, those were just lying around. But we soon discover why. It's because Jeff's test is just wrapping up in this very building, and that the bulk of Saw 4 takes place at the same time as Saw 3. Strom hears Amanda shoot Lynn. Right when Strom gets to the room, the door slams shut because Jeff kills John. Strom uses the key on the door. The message "open the door and you'll find me" was Jigsaw talking about himself. Perhaps Jeff will get his tuna casserole tonight after all. When Strom enters the room, Jeff pulls a gun on Strom and screams about his daughter. Strom shoots and kills the innocent man Jeff because Jeff's gun was out of bullets. No, I guess Jeff is going to have to settle for tuna casket roll instead. Hoffman shows up and finally gets to slam the door on someone. He locks Strom in the room with Jigsaw and the other three bodies. The movie ends right where it started, with Hoffman in the morgue listening to the tape saying that he'll be tested. A couple of the twists in the movie are similar to what we've seen before. Like in the second movie, someone who you think is part of a test actually ends up being an accomplice. And there's timeline shenanigans like in Saw 2 as well. Another thing worth noting is that this film has the same fucking ending where someone is locked in a room with at least one corpse. Saw 1 and 2 both have people in the same bathroom. Saw 3 and 4 both have people in the same room in the meat factory. The series has always been convoluted, and this one just keeps piling it on, and I'm all for it. This isn't realistic, it's a little derivative, and sometimes things go a little too well according to what Jigsaw predicted. Like him knowing that Strom would kill Jeff, which would mean that he knows Amanda is going to fail, and that Jeff is going to kill him. But let's not overthink it. I think enough of the big plot points make enough sense that I can go along with it. I know I made a joke in the intro about this movie being written in a day, but I enjoyed it a lot. I'm giving Saw 4 a 7 out of 10. I told you I wouldn't give them all an 8 out of 10 rating. Even though it takes place at the same time as Saw 3, Amanda isn't involved in the main plot of Saw 4. I bet if Jigsaw asked her if she wanted to help with it, she would have declined and thought, "No, you don't need me. That game is already rigged." Saw 5 is the next movie. It was directed by David Hackle, a series veteran who previously worked as a production designer and second unit director. Saw 5 also shares the same writing duo as its immediate predecessor. After the Lionsgate and Twisted Pictures logos and text credits for those two companies, the movie cuts to a rooftop on a rainy night. It zooms in on a door, and this shot feels like another production company logo rather than the start of the movie. It reminds me of the Voltage Pictures logo, which also zooms in on a door, but as you can probably guess, that one is electrified. Inside the Saw 5 door, a man named Seth wakes up strapped to a table, and a videotape starts playing. Jigsaw wants justice for Seth only going to prison for 5 years for murder, being released on a technicality and not learning his lesson. Seth needs to place his hands in devices that will crush them. Otherwise, a swinging axe pendulum will lower and slice him in half horizontally. He hesitates but goes through with it. However, the axe continues swinging and lowering. Before he dies, he looks over, notices someone peeping in the room, and says something. This is very reminiscent of Carrie's unwinnable trap in the third movie, when Amanda shows up and Carrie recognizes her. Then there's the title card, and given the hand violence we just witnessed with Seth, we hilariously hear Agent Strom saying, "Let me see your hands," over the title. He's not a lead singer pumping up a crowd. Instead, he's talking to Jeff at the end of the last movie before Hoffman locks him inside the room. Strom finds a hidden door in the wall. He ignores a tape telling him not to go any further and is stabbed with a syringe by someone in a pig mask. I really like this next shot. Strom wakes up in a dark room with his head in a tank that has lights in it. The shot starts from very far away, and he's so tiny, and then it zooms in to where the tank fills up about a third of the frame's width. Water begins to fill the tank, and Strom grabs a pen from his pocket and stabs himself in the neck so he can breathe. This is embarrassing, but I'll share it anyway. When I was a kid, I watched the movie Anaconda. Much like Saw, I'd first heard about this from another kid or kids. This time it was some kids on the bus. "Did you hear about that movie with the giant snake?" they asked. Well, I did see the movie after that, and it has a scene where someone performs a tracheotomy and cuts a hole into someone else's throat to help them breathe. I can handle throat slittings like Xavier's in Saw 2 and John's in Saw 3 just fine. But something about sticking a tube in there makes it incredibly hard for me to watch. And Anaconda started that fear for me. I haven't seen Insidious 4: The Last Key yet, but I know a demon sticks a key into someone's throat in that, so I'm not looking forward to that moment whenever I get around to watching it. After Strom's trap, Hoffman walks out of the meatpacking plant carrying Jeff's daughter. He doesn't think anyone else survived until he sees paramedics wheeling out Strom. Next up, Jill meets John's lawyer, who plays her a VHS tape and gives her an important box. She's already wearing a key around her neck, and she uses it to open the box and peeks inside, but the audience doesn't get to see its contents. At a police press conference, they announce that the Jigsaw murders are over and that Hoffman has been promoted to detective lieutenant, and he's given a plaque. The scene focuses on a blonde reporter woman with glasses. She doesn't do anything here other than write some things down. Maybe she'll show up in the next movie. I don't know. Afterwards, Hoffman finds an envelope with his name on it. Inside, there's a note that reads, "I know who you are." That's a little superfluous since the outside of the envelope already made that clear. He goes to the evidence room to check out Strom's phone, and then goes to the hospital. Perez has passed away from her injuries in the last movie, which is really sad. She didn't deserve that. Hoffman enters her room where Strom is already sitting in a chair. We know it's Perez's room because of the more copious than there probably should be amounts of blood on the pillow and bed sheets. It looks like all her wounds just simultaneously exploded. Perez's last words were about Hoffman, and Strom doesn't believe that Hoffman escaped from the meatpacking plant because his straps broke, and that there's more to it than that. Hoffman tells him to either come out and say something else, or back off, and I love his performance. It's great. Hoffman leaves, and then Special Agent Erickson arrives and says he's kicked Strom off the Jigsaw case. Hoffman then enters a lair, and we see another cute diorama, this one more elaborate than the bathroom model in the first movie, along with multiple monitors showing the movie's main traps. 5 people wake up in a room with collars around their necks that are each connected to a strong wire, and they need to complete a series of tests. Included in this group is Luba, who's played by Megan Good from the movie The Unborn. And there's also Britt, Malik, Charles, and Ashley. The point of these tests is for them to work together as a team and do the opposite of what their instincts tell them. In the first room, there are 5 keys in front of them, but moving forward causes everyone else to get pulled back towards blades behind them. They have 60 seconds once it starts, and there's also a secondary 15-minute timer which will set off a bomb. I like the scene where they're talking it over before they start the trap. The conversation descends into an argument between Charles and Malik. Charles pointing out Malik's drug addiction and asking him if he's been playing with matches again upsets him. Malik pulls forward and starts the 60-second timer. It's revealed that Ashley is a fire inspector, and she's the only one who doesn't grab a key. She's pulled back and gets decapitated. Before leaving, Britt grabs all the keys just in case she needs them for later. In the next room, we find out that Luba works for the Department of City Planning. Britt works for a real estate company as a senior vice president. Malik comes from a wealthy family. Charles is an investigative journalist for the Herald. Is any of this important? Yes. The room has 3 chambers that people can go into to secure themselves from an explosion. They have to break jars hanging from the ceiling and find the keys that have shapes on them. Malik grabs a stick and breaks the first jar. Right off the bash, Charles the journalist grabs another stick and hits Malik with it multiple times. Luba tries to stop him, but he pushes her off. Charles then starts breaking all the jars with his stick. Britt and then Luba find their keys. Malik tries to grab the last key, but Charles insidiously steps on his arm. Luba sticks up for Malik and whacks Charles on the back, knocking him down, which is making good for him. Malik enters the last chamber. The time runs out, and Charles gets blown up. In the next room, there's a bathtub in the middle. There are 5 locks on the exit door, and each one of the locks is tied to an electric current and its own cord. They have 3 minutes to connect the 5 cords to the bathwater. The cords aren't long enough to reach the water on their own. Immediately, Luba tries to force Malik into the tub. She still has her stick from the last room and swings it at him, causing him to fall in. Britt grabs the cord that has a pointed end and looks at Malik. Without averting her gaze away from him, she stabs Luba in the neck with the end of the cord. I really love this moment. They lift Luba's body into the tub and connect the 5 cords to it to open the door. The last room has a machine with 5 holes, and each hole has a table saw inside. At the bottom is a jar with 5 tubes that run into it. Malik and Britt figure out that they need to stick their arms into the holes and fill the jar with 10 pints of blood to open the door. Before they start, Malik asks Britt to try the keys she grabbed in the first room, and he asks why there are 5 slots. This is when Britt puts it all together. All of the keys in the first room are the same. Only one person had to get one, and then they could have passed it down the line and everyone could have used the same key to free themselves. The 3 chambers in the second room were big enough to hold more than one person, so no one had to die there. In the bathtub room, all 5 people were supposed to be slightly shocked. I'd guess that's only like 10% of how bad it would be if you accidentally touched the Voltage Pictures door handle. Although I want to point out that 2 of the electrical current cords end in a point that someone would have had to have stabbed themselves with. That's not fair they're not all like that, and some people would have gotten jumper cables that they could have just clamped onto their hands. Britt and Malik close the door and start the jigsaw tape. He mentions that a human body has about 10 pints of blood, but can survive with half that. They have 15 minutes to make their sacrifice. Malik reveals that in exchange for drugs, he started a fire and burned down what he thought was an abandoned building, but it really had 8 people inside and they all died. The FBI caught him, but he made a deal and got off. Ashley, who died in the first room, was a fire inspector who falsified a report about the fire. Luba was a city planner who took bribes to grant the permit for the condo that was going to go up in the place of the burned down building. The investigative journalist Charles was covering the story, but he never published it. Britt is the real estate developer who started the entire process of burning down the building to make room for a new one, and bribed everyone knowing the building wasn't abandoned. Britt and Malik realize that they're both, in their own words, monsters who deserve to be there, so they tie a bandana above their elbows and they stick their hands into the slots on the machine. This is very hard to watch. The movie's editing is less frantic than usual throughout, but this moment is what we're used to with its quick cuts and dizzying camera work. There's a lot of blood going everywhere, and not all of it ends up flowing down the tube into the jar. I'd be pissed if I was one of these characters and I needed to give any more blood than necessary because it wasn't all collected. They manage to fill the jar, and the door opens. Both of them are barely alive, and Malik is on the floor, and he raises his arm up so that we can see the aftermath. It's been sliced in half vertically almost down to the elbow. It is such a fucking disgusting image. Something similar to this happens in the 2022 movie Men, and Saw 5 is definitely the better film with arms getting cut in half like this. During all of these tests, Hoffman calls Erickson and leaves a message that he needs to talk to Strom but can't find him. Meanwhile, Strom goes to the FBI place to see if he can find anything on Hoffman. He discovers that Seth, the man in the pendulum trap at the start of the movie, killed Hoffman's sister. Erickson spots Strom on his way out, and Strom lies and says he's grabbing a few things and is taking some time off. Off he goes to Seth's murder site, and we get a flashback that shows that Hoffman staged the entire thing to look like it was Jigsaw's work. I'm impressed he got his voice to sound like Jigsaw's on the tape. When Hoffman visited the crime scene, he was immediately upfront with everyone about how he knew who Seth was. Afterwards, Hoffman received a short note with the words, "I know who you are." This is of course identical to the note he received after the press conference earlier in the movie, but later chronologically. There's a really good sequence here where Hoffman enters his apartment building. He's paranoid of every sound, which ends up just being random people and a dog named Pee-wee that barks at him. Hoffman's response is just saying, "Pee-wee, shit," which is pretty great. When he approaches an elevator and the door opens, he's blocking the path, and a woman immediately asks Hoffman, "Do you mind?" And a few other people walk out, including one dude who is very dramatically shaking his head at Hoffman. But there's one person left in the elevator, and that's John Kramer. He stabs Hoffman with a syringe. Everything in this sequence feels off in just the right way. It's a little Lynchian. Hoffman wakes up tied to a chair with a shotgun strapped to his chest, pointed at his chin, with a string around the trigger that could easily set it off. Jigsaw isn't happy about being credited with Hoffman's murderous revenge because he thinks everyone deserves a chance. He's been following Hoffman around and knows his story. There's some pretty good acting here from both of them. John taunts Hoffman by putting his finger on the trigger and pulling it, but it doesn't go off, making Hoffman believe that the gun wasn't loaded. He blackmails Hoffman to help him, but he calls it redemption. Hoffman can either bring John in and pay for murdering Seth, or he can be a Jigsaw accomplice. Hoffman suggests that he can murder John, but John says he's already thought of that and that Hoffman's crime will be exposed if John disappears. After John cuts Hoffman loose, he's holding the gun and we see that it's loaded with a shell in the second slot. Hey, I don't know guns outside of the Resident Evil video games, so that's how I'm describing it. I don't fucking care about being more accurate. Back in the present, Erickson calls Hoffman back, and Hoffman mentions that there might be another Jigsaw accomplice. Erickson checks the evidence and sees that Strom took all of the Jigsaw files. Strom visits the site of Paul's barbed wire cage trap from the first movie. We see flashbacks of John and Hoffman kidnapping Paul and planting Dr. Gordon's pinlight as evidence at the crime scene. We also get to see them preparing the house from the second movie. I really like the conversation they have, in which Hoffman is doubtful that everything will play out how John expects. And John has a great line where he says, "If you're good at anticipating the human mind, it leaves nothing to chance." We've already seen how great John is at this, especially in the last movie when he knew that Jeff would fail his test and that Strom would kill Jeff. And despite not even testing him, I'm sure he also knew that Chris just wanted a divorce. Meanwhile, Jill Tuck goes in to talk to Erickson and tells him that Agent Strom is still following her. In the FBI headquarters parking garage, Hoffman calls Erickson using Strom's phone that he stole from evidence. Erickson calls it back and gets Strom's voicemail, so he asks another one of his people to track the phone. Hoffman turns off the phone, goes back to the place where 5 people are being tested for being involved with the fire, and turns the phone back on and leaves to go to the police department. Strom is staking out the PD, and he tails Hoffman when he leaves and follows him to a house. Inside, Strom investigates and finds a door in the floor. He goes down to find some dirty hallways underneath that look a little like a factory boiler room. Eventually, Strom finds a room with the box filled with glass shards that we got to see briefly in the last movie. There's a tape recorder inside. He plays it and Hoffman's voice tells Strom that he needs to trust him and get in the box. Otherwise, he'll die. Hoffman shows up, and during the struggle, Strom pushes Hoffman into the box and slams its door shut. Then the door to the room slams shut on its own behind Strom. The FBI finds the location of Strom's phone, so Erickson goes to the test site. He finds the layer with the monitors of the test with the 5 people involved with the fire. Of important note is that on one of the shelves, there's a skull with the top cut off and wires coming out of it. Erickson sees Britt, who's crawled out the door. At least she made it a little longer than Malik before passing out from blood loss. That's faint praise. Erickson calls an ambulance, and then he calls Strom's phone and finds it on the desk. Back to Hoffman and Strom. Strom asks Hoffman how to open the door, and Hoffman signals to the tape recorder. Strom plays it, and it continues. If he doesn't trust Hoffman, he will disappear and inherit Hoffman's legacy. And this moment is the best part of the movie. Hoffman's expression here as he gives a small grin and tilts his head to the side is amazing. The box tilts back and lowers into the floor. The walls then close in and break Strom's bones. There's a shot from above of Hoffman in the box with blood splattering all over the lid. The edges of the frame are black, and they continue to close in. We cut back to Strom getting crushed a couple of times as we see less and less of Hoffman in the middle of the frame, before the walls finally close all the way and completely cover Hoffman. And on this black screen, the credits start. This is one hell of an ending, and it's a little different for the series. Since the movie ends here, I guess technically Hoffman is locked in a room with a corpse. The difference is that he can get out whenever he wants, which I'm sure he'll do in the next one. Saw 5 is only 95 minutes long, and time flies by. Individual scenes in this movie are good, some really good. All of the revelations make sense and are satisfying. But the movie feels a little underwhelming after the rush of the last few, with their non-stop information being piled onto you in such an entertaining way. It just doesn't feel like there's as much to Saw 5. We find out why Hoffman is working for Jigsaw, which is nice to know, and then he frames Strom as Jigsaw's accomplice. It's a good idea, and a natural progression for him to tie up some loose ends, but it's not impressive as far as the twists in these movies go. And we could already piece together a lot of the flashbacks without seeing them. As soon as we find out that Hoffman's an accomplice in the last movie, it's obvious he did things like giving Jigsaw police files, and that he's the one who's strong enough to help kidnap people and put them into the traps. It's fun to revisit some of the old places, but there's nothing too surprising there. And the movie's main series of tests feels disconnected. The fire was never mentioned before, and finding out how these 5 people are tied to the fire doesn't have the same weight as the reveal in Saw 2 that everyone in the house who wasn't Daniel had been framed by Detective Matthews. I feel weird criticizing this movie for not being as convoluted as its last couple of predecessors, but the movie feels a little empty in comparison. Fortunately, it doesn't drag or feel padded. I'm intrigued by the setup showing that Jill Tuck is more involved in everything than we thought, and the execution of the ending is awesome. I'm giving this a 6 out of 10. It's the weakest movie so far, but I still like it a lot. That concludes part 2 of this video series. Thank you so much for watching. The next part will be my Saw 6 and Saw 7 discussions.